everyone. Welcome to Intuitive View. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. It's raining in California, which is good. That's a good thing. But I'm really excited to introduce John from John of New. I'm sure that you know who he is. I'm sure you've seen him in the chat if you haven't seen his channel. So he has a YouTube channel. And John, you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your channel?
Sure, sure. They call me John of New because after I had 19 different psychics tell me about a very specific past life, I went and got regressed and remembered the life of John, the beloved apostle. And so now what I do is my whole channel is about me coming forward and speaking my personal truth and bringing forward what I learned a couple thousand years ago from a good buddy of mine. And now I just kind of share it with everyone. And I just counted this morning, we have 704 videos in a year on that channel. So there's a lot of stuff
Holy
over there to go
cow.
pile through. Yeah, it's been crazy this year.
Wow.
So
That's
we're
amazing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so
Go ahead.
that's the basics of my channel, and that's basically what I do. And I'm really excited about this topic today, Kim, because it is something that I know that I have dived into with a lot of various religions and a lot of background in this. So I think it's gonna be fun.
That's great because I wanted to talk about these things for a long time. So for those of you who don't know, we're going to talk about good and evil, crime and punishment, both here and in the afterlife. But the question I get probably the most are well, actually two questions I get the most for my channel because I read, as you know, on politics a lot. I get, will Donald Trump be punished? You know, will he get his comeuppance? And the other one is, if he doesn't get his comeuppance here, will he get his comeuppance later on when he's gone from this earth?
Uh,
Will he then get his comeuppance? Go ahead, John.
yeah, that's a great question, Kim. Kim, just so you know, I'm hearing both you and your computer talking.
Oh,
So I'm hoping the recording doesn't pick that up, and if it is,
is it better now?
yes,
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that,
at
guys.
least I think so. Hold on, because there's a delay.
Okay,
I'll give you just a second to let you know. Nope, I can still hear it.
you can? What is it?
If everybody in the chat room, if you can hear it, let her know as well. It might
Yeah, let
just
me
be
know
me.
if you can hear me twice, I guess.
Yeah, hear the echo. But I am definitely picking it up twice.
Okay, let me.
Actually, hold on for 1 second. Oh, I think it's me. I think it's me. I got
Okay.
it.
Oh, good.
Go ahead and try again.
Okay, now can you hear me?
I think that fixed it. I think I fixed it on
Okay,
my end.
yay.
Whew, it
Yay.
was really confusing to me. Well, let's talk about will Donald Trump get his comeuppance? I think it's a great question because, when you look at all these people who are doing near death experiences and going across, they always talk about being having the life review. But
Right.
I look at that very differently. I look at that as not a life review as much as being folded back into the oneness of God or
Okay.
consciousness. And what they always tell you in those near death experiences is that they experience the entire life and all the feelings of that life, but they also experience it from everybody they harmed and
Mhm,
how they
mhm.
experience it as well. So anybody who does anything here, when they cross over, experiences all of the pain and suffering that they ever inflicted on anybody. So we're not actually talking about whether he'll be punished. We're actually talking about whether he'll receive justice here on earth.
Right,
And that is what people are looking for is justice because they want in the physical world they want to have a consequence shown to them.
right.
And when he does cross over, he's going to experience all the suffering and all the pain he's ever caused. But the question that becomes is, will he find justice here? And Kim is better equipped to answer that question than I am because I don't delve into prophecy or prognostication. But I know that Kim is one of the clearest I've ever seen because Kim also. I know you have said it multiple times that you're just reading the potential of the moment. I, if I was going to read what I would think, I have seen him in an orange jumpsuit for years.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's good news.
yeah, yeah, I've seen him in an orange jumpsuit for years, and it was really kind of funny because his face matched his suit.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen both. I've seen him not like kind of leave the earth before trial is done, and I've also seen him in jail. So I think it's there's a few different realities that could come
Right.
into play, depending on where we want it to go. But so I wanted to ask you, John, about the idea of good and evil.
Yeah.
I never call people evil, and I don't like that term because I always think that it it robs people of responsibility. If they're just evil, well, they can't help it. They're evil. What can they do? It's like, there are evil acts for sure.
Yeah.
But what do you think about um, Eckhart Tolle says that we really don't know what is good or what is bad because there's higher order in place. And so if something horrible happens to us, 5 years from now, that could have been the best thing that ever happened in our life because it set off a chain of events.
Right.
But we really don't know in the moment what is good and what is bad.
Right.
And the best place to be in is just in a mode of acceptance all the time, whether something bad is happening or something good is happening, just being kind of in flow with life and just kind
Right.
of accepting what comes.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, let me start with a Shakespeare quote because I think I'm a big Shakespeare guy. There is nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah.
Um, the whole idea of our thoughts being the creator of our experiences is in every spiritual tradition out there. Buddha says, "What you think you become, you create your world." Krishna said, "You are the culmination of your thought." The Bible says, "As a man thinketh, so is he." So our thoughts, whether good or evil, we think about them from the prospect of what we think about the act. Um, the other thing about good and evil is a very interesting thing because the polarity of good and evil never came into existence until the Middle Ages.
Oh,
Because when they talk about it biblically, they always use the evil is Satan. But when you dive into the etymology of the original word, it literally means temptation. It doesn't mean a
right,
polar opposite or an evil. It means just temptation, and we all go through temptations in our lives. That is our Satan.
right,
And
right.
so, we have those ideas of what good and evil is. But what happened was when Dante wrote the Inferno, he really created this polarity. And this polarity turned into a situation where now we're like, oh my gosh, the devil's out to get me, or all this sort of elements like that. But I want people to think about this. You know, all this good and evil concepts comes within the past what 2-3 thousand years. Now we know full well that the first cave art that humans ever did is 37,000 years old. So this is a blip in time in human evolution where good and evil actually kind of even comes into our thought process. And then when it comes in,
Right,
it's not a polarity, it's temptation. And then
right.
when it gets up to the Middle Ages, then it becomes this polarity that is used to put fear into people. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And people are asking, I just saw a couple of people asking about, does intent make a difference? Is intention, you know, y- you can use the analogy of like the person who steals, right? Stealing bread for their family or stealing, robbing a bank.
Right.
It's, that intent of behind it. Um, any kind of, what we might call an evil act, or does that matter?
I absolutely do think it matters. I think that what you sow you do reap, and I think it will come back to you in some harm, in some form. The Hindu belief of karma is actually just means what you sow you reap. It's not one of those long running things. It's what you sow you reap. But when you look
Right.
at it from the idea, if you're doing evil deeds, evil deeds will be done upon you because that is what you're sowing, and so it will be reaped upon you. Your acts will be met with an equal and opposite force, and so in the end, you're always going to run into that intention being put out, but that intention
Right.
is going to be met with something much better. And when it comes back and is met with something better, the one with the negative intention, I believe, is going to end up suffering in the end for their own actions.
Right. Thank you, Carol. I, you know, why is it so important for us to, or why do we think it's so important for us to have justice um, when there's been a wrong? Why is that so important? I think that the dream is something we already saw with Michael Cohen, right? He was horrible. He did horrible things. He got caught. He paid for his crimes. He apologized, and now he's trying to be better. Right?
Yeah,
That's the perfect scenario. That's what we all
perfect.
want to happen. Um, in a way, I feel like they want to be in a position to be able to forgive people.
Right.
Um, they just want people to own up to it and feel sorry. And is that what justice is about? Or what do you think? Where do you think justice? We have to have justice. Where does that come from?
There's a couple elements in this because, you know, for me, I believe we're here to experience love in all forms, and sometimes that means we experience the lack of it, and
Mm,
and that idea of being here and experiencing that separation from source means that we have to go through bad things in our lives or do bad things in our lives so that we have those elements. So, but justice comes down to, very interestingly, it comes back to linear time because, you know, I'm very fortunate. I crossed over twice, and when I crossed over twice, I experienced there is no time over there.
mhm,
And in linear time, something bad happens, and then we start going, well, we have to get this resolved right here,
mm,
right now.
mhm,
So they're really into the time frame of getting that done. The other thing is when something unloving is done in this world, we feel because our natural state is love. Our natural state is to come in from the other side in loving form. And then we learn of all of our goods and our evils and our fears and our beliefs here in the physical plane. And so being here in the physical plane, we now are here, we're having this experience. We want instant retribution. And the longer it goes, the longer it seems, and then justice seems to be held off. And we really want justice because we're really in the mindset of the physical world. And if you really think about it, when they cross over, they're going to experience everything they did anyway. So they're going to get their justice in the end. But people want it in the physical world because that's the only place they're conscious. They're not conscious on the other side right now.
right, right. And I think and there's something too. It's like uh, we we want to see it happen. We want to see
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and we want to be part of the the aftermath of it, whether it's forgiveness or they're just put away and they got their comeuppance. And so it's like, I think you're right that we know we have limited time and we want to see it. We want to be part of it in some way.
Right.
Uh, I wanted to ask you, so I did write some questions so people will know what we're talking about if they pop on in the middle. But this is a question for you, John. Can people
Okay.
be evil or do people just commit evil acts?
I think people just commit evil acts, and I believe this is my personal belief. I believe the reason why people are doing evil acts is because they're mistaking power for love. I think that we're all here to experience unconditional love in some form, and when we can't feel it because we're empathetically are in this place of only seeing the fears and the anxieties of the world, then we start to grasp for power, and we start to do whatever we need to take power. And you know, in the Bible, it says the love of money is the root of many evils.
Mhm.
But it's not about money; it's about the love of it. You know, and sometimes we can love power too, and sometimes evil acts are done in the form of power. I would say even like serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, which is big in the news right now because of that TV show.
Right.
I believe that he was literally trying to find unconditional love, and
Yeah.
and he was trying to devour it from others. And I think that's why he got lost in this power trip of adrenaline. And I think in reality, had someone early on in his life really shown him unconditional love, he might never had that experience.
Right. My daughter she has a YouTube channel that's all true crime, and she compares true crime, the actual cases with the movies that are made about them. And she kind of compares and contrasts what was right, what was wrong, the symbolism and that kind of stuff. But she said in all of the cases that she's looked at, every single one that she's researched, has not been one yet where somebody at some point could have changed what happened with a murderer.
Right.
They could have, a teacher could have stepped in, a counselor could have said, there was always points along the way where somebody or something could have turned it around.
Right.
So I think that it illustrates exactly what you're talking about,
Right.
that it's really the acts, it's not the people.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, there was a woman named Antoinette Tuff, and she was she worked in the office of a high school, and a boy walked in with an AR-15, and she was on the police on the phone with the police, and you could hear her saying to this young boy, she says, "What's wrong? What's wrong, son? What's wrong? What can I do for you, honey?" And he says, "Nobody cares." And that's what this kid's saying. Nobody cares. It doesn't really matter. She says, "I care, baby. I care. I love you, baby." And she walks over and she gives him a hug, and he put his gun down. That love, that compassion stopped the event. The police were
Right.
outside ready to come in and kill the kid. And it's a very interesting moment. Evil acts can be done not only to others but to ourselves as well. There are a lot of people who don't feel loved or feel. A lot of people come into this world and they know what the world's supposed to feel like, but it just doesn't, and they get subjugated by it. They get Usually you'll find these people, they will turn themselves into a hermit, and they'll only like to hang out with animals because animals are unconditionally loving, and they have that space because they're so empathic. And I think it's a beautiful thing that they're so empathic. But
Mhm.
it does it's a shield for them to stay at home with their pets because they feel safe there. I often go to the grocery store when I walk in. Before I go in, I stop and I get the feeling of love. I just stop and I exhale and I set down on my fears and my anxieties, which is what evil's based in. Evil's based in committing a fear onto someone else, or projecting
Mhm.
fear onto somebody else. So I drop all my fears before I go into the grocery store. And as I walk through the store, people smile at me and talk to me. And I don't say
Right.
anything to them, but all I do is go, because when you're focusing on an evil, you're actually giving whatever evil act you think is there power. And Mother Teresa once said, when they asked her to go to an anti-war rally, she said, "No, have a peace rally and I'll come." Because she knew
Mhm.
the focus was on the evil of war, and what she really wanted to create was peace. And we know scientifically that when all of us get into a fear state, specifically around evil, we hold air in our bodies. And the reason we hold the air in our bodies is because that's the primal fear response. You know,
Mhm.
if you're a parent, you're listening to this, and you've ever seen your toddler going across the living room and they trip and fall and almost smack their head on the coffee table, I guarantee you that you went like this.
Right.
Right? Right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
sucked as much air into your lungs as possible so you could run fast. That's what that is. That's the primal response. If you watch National
Mhm.
Geographic show, there's always a doomed gazelle that sees that thing show up and it goes, and it gasps for it. It's the
Yeah.
same primal response. But actors on Broadway, when they walk on stage, they're standing there in front of 1,000 people and they forget their lines. What are they trained to do? They're trained to exhale, and all their lines rush back into their heads
Mm.
because they shut off the fear response. Evil is designed to elicit fear, which is why it turned into a polarity in the Middle Ages, because in the Middle Ages is when the Catholic Church and all the big churches grew up into power, and they started
Right.
using fear as the tool to get people in to their religion. And the polarity of good and evil, if you look back historically, as I said, the word Satan, which is the word for evil in Catholicism, only means temptation. And actually, if you look it up in the Bible right now, one of the first translations you'll see is accuser. Somebody
Oh,
accusing.
wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a really interesting word. But if you take the same thing, you take the story of Buddha when he was meditating, the evil character of Mara came and tempted him, right? And then the story of Jesus, I call him Jeshua. Jeshua out in the meditating in the desert. What happened? The devil came and tempted him, right? So it was all about
Right.
temptation. So the whole idea of the polarity of good and evil really didn't exist until the Middle Ages. And so, and prior to that, back to the caveman days, it didn't really become a thought until people started diving into what spirituality really is.
Right.
And so it's a really interesting topic because, in 37,000 years of human history, and we know there's more than that because that's where art started, but it wasn't until these past 2,000 years that we started actually even dealing with good and evil as a concept.
So, and that is a perfect segue to my next question, which is, can there be good if there is no evil? Do you need one to illustrate the other?
Well, actually, it's a great question. I'm going to frame it a little differently,
Yeah,
just
please
because
do.
I believe God is love. I believe that the source, the consciousness that we come from, is a pure, unconditional love. Why do
Right.
I believe that? Because when I was standing on the beach of my regression, and Joshua walked over and placed his hand on my heart, I went to that place, and I used the words unconditional love, but it doesn't touch it because words are imperfect. It's so much more than that. It's just
Right.
the pure essence of love that you're in. And so I know that when you cross over, that's what you're embraced by. It's that pure, unconditional love. And in the regression, my regressionist said, well, what's the next most important moment? And the next most important moment was feeling all my fears and my anxieties. And the reason that was the next most important point was because without having my fears and my anxieties, I could never know the source, God, love, fully. Because you can't know
Right.
anything without knowing the polar opposite, have something to measure against. So, can there be good if there is no evil? The thing is, evil is based in fear. And
Right.
fear is an emotional reaction to a future event that may or may not happen with you focused on a negative outcome. And so it's determined by your negative outcome. Because if you didn't have a negative outlook of what was coming and you thought it was a positive, you wouldn't be afraid. You wouldn't have that. So evil is in temptation, evil is in the mind. And it's a very interesting topic because I've seen a lot of people who, in near death experiences, cross over and see hell. I've seen that in near death experiences. I've seen people who believe wholeheartedly in demons because they say they've seen them, right? But when you dive into their stories, you very quickly understand that that's their belief. They believe that, and those thoughts
Right.
create, and so they see it.
Create that reality for
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Um, so going back to uh, crime and punishment, right? And um, well, what purpose does earthly punishment serve?
It really is for the people who are staying in the earthly plane. It's
Right.
it's it's really for them to feel like they've had gotten justice.
Right.
But there was in the the recent Lord of the Rings TV show that's out. It just came out, Rings of Power. There was a line that when I heard it, I was like, I have to remember that line. It's like, it turns the heart dark to call dark deeds good.
Mm.
So somebody asked me recently about the Parkland shooter verdict,
Oh,
and they
right.
said, should they have been put to death or have life in prison? And a lot of people wanted him dead. A
Right.
lot of people wanted him dead. And two things. I go, well, okay, if he were to die, he would cross over, he would experience all the pain and suffering that he caused in life, but then he'd be in pure, unconditional love. Is that really
Right.
justice?
Right.
Right? Right? Is that really justice? Right? The other part, the
Right.
other part is you put him in a prison for life. Now he's surrounded by people who if you know anything about prisoners, they don't like child abusers or child. He probably
Right,
he probably wouldn't last very long in prison anyway. He'd have a real rough time. But
right,
which is justice in the physical world? Which is the more loving thing to do? For me personally, I think that the concept of justice here for the people left behind. I like to think of the line of the story of Pope John Paul, who got shot, and he ended up becoming friends with the man who shot him in prison, and remained friends with him until the day he died.
mm,
He literally went and talked to him and talked him down out of his fears and his anxieties and befriended him, and they became friends. And I think that Pope John Paul's lively experience was probably better than the person who had a loved one die and then took part in ending the life of someone else, because it doesn't really resolve the situation.
right,
Both situations are still there. I think life in prison is probably a better earthly punishment. But for the crimes, I think you really need to look at what the crimes are. Like the majority of crime that we have in America is poverty based.
right,
If we would do a more loving society and help people with their hand get their up out of poverty, we'd have less crime. And
right,
so they do evils because they feel they have to.
right. And you're perfectly segueing right into my question, so I love this. You're preempting the questions. So if the idea of prison is ultimately about redemption, what should a prison system look like?
Well,
Because ours is not set up that way. I know that, but it's also different than the rest of the world because a lot of places in the world are set up that way.
absolutely. And there are some prisons over in Europe that there's no bars, and
Hmm.
they go through treatments. And there's a lady here, and I wish I could remember her name. I think it was Carol Briney, who was bringing metaphysics into prisons. And I actually spoke in a few prisons for her. And it's very interesting because her program has been continuing because it's successful. People
Hmm.
find hope and find that they can resolve their situations. And the one thing that most people, especially people who've done something evil or wrong in their life, they have to realize that they can create new at any moment. Every moment's a new moment, and the real key is saying, okay, that was that part of my life. I can have regret for the terrible things I've done, but I can now choose something new. And
Hmm.
we have most people tend to be in the present moment, but they're focused on all the things they've done in the past or all the things that have happened to them in the past, what they're the
Right.
victim of, or given, or harm, how they harmed others. And they sit in this moment and they go, well, this is how it is, and this is who I am, and they define themselves by this moment. But in the
Hmm.
reality of it is in this moment you get to choose. And if you stay focused backwards on evil done to you or evil you've done, then you're not actually letting it go and releasing it. So I often say, first of all, say that that's that part of your life and that you're creating something new. I believe that's where one of the misinterpretations of the Bible uh, is huge. Is that the be born again? I think it means set down your past and start something entirely new and different. And in Buddhism, the number one quote you always hear is life is suffering. But when they translate it correctly, because it was translated from a conceptual language to the literal language of English, but when they
Hmm.
actually translate the quote correctly, the quote is, life is suffering because of our habitual response to our subconscious belief. And so if we can stay in our present moment and change our habit of focusing on the negative and switch it to focusing on doing good and beautiful things and loving things, we can live a loving life and create a loving life around us. And if you've done someone wrong, there's a lot of things about clearing your conscience you have to do, right? You have to try to make amends with whoever you can. but you
Right.
also have to come to a point where you've done everything you can. If they don't want to accept it, you have to accept it. That's okay, and you have to move on. Because if you're both anchored in the same moment, then nothing's changing for anyone. And the less
Right.
attachment you have, because we are all connected, the less attachment they'll
Right. Right. I totally agree with that.
have.
um,
That's why I like
so
you, Kim.
yeah, I totally agree. um, so, and I think this is a little bit related, but is there a spiritual purpose behind earthly justice?
I think so. I think that earthly justice is a process of thought, right? I think that we are here to experience our life in the way that we choose to experience it. We are, in fact, the creator of our experience, and so the spiritual purpose is to experience, you know, either love or fear or forgiveness, and justice itself is in my way of thinking, justice itself is kind of the retribution for losing some love in your life, some form of love. And the question that becomes is, am I learning from this experience? Am I so focused on the past and what has been done and the evils that have been done unto me or my loved ones that I am going to be stuck in this moment for the rest of my life? And justice itself can be a learning process, but I think as far as a spiritual lesson, I think it is the temptation. I
Hmm.
think, trying to get justice for this is one thing or another. Now, of course, in this physical world, people do wrong things. They are sowing. They are going to reap in some form, and I've never
Right.
seen anyone really get away with much. There are some who get away with some stuff, but very few get away with much. It's like you look at let's go back and show my years a little bit. O.J. Simpson, remember him?
Right.
Right. He
Yeah.
got away with it, right? The glove didn't fit, so we must have quit, right? But within 2 years, he was imprisoned for something else, right?
Right.
His reputation now is that he's a murderer, and everywhere he goes, people still to this day call him a murderer.
Right.
So he's going through life with a mark on his head.
Right.
Is that justice?
Right. Right.
Because in reality, he's got to live with that every day. He can't let it go because no one will let him let it go.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
yeah, so
Um, when I always I've said many times on the channel that uh, that we keep to bring this back to Trump, but people keep wanting this guy who's committed crimes all his life. He's been this kind of person all his life and done so many awful things. They want to see him in prison, and I let people know that I mean I would like that too, but I but but
I'm with
I
you on that.
also
I'm with you on
yeah
that point.
I
Don't get
I
me wrong.
also am remind people that he's miserable.
Absolutely miserable and
I've
and
never
and
seen
insane.
yeah, I've never seen anyone so joyless, so loveless, so miserable. So he is already suffering the
Right.
consequences of the actions of his lifetime.
And he's been living that most of his life because you hear the interviews with Mary Trump, his cousin, and she said he's always been that way. He's
Right.
he's never laughed, had a joke. He's never had that joyful experience in his life, really. So I think he's been a sociopath his whole life,
Yeah.
and I think it came down from his father.
I was gonna say raised by a sociopath, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Um, and I did have a a kind of I don't know if it was an epiphany or if it was just my guides kind of tapping me on the shoulder, but I was thinking about Marjorie Taylor Greene
Mm.
because I was reading about a few things she said and just so hateful, so mean, so just filled with just hate. And I did have the feeling of I wonder if some of these people are actually empathic or empaths that couldn't handle it,
Oh, that's
and they've built up walls and to kind of uh, like how when people lash out first, so you don't lash out at them, like that kind of thing, almost like a defense of the world, because
Right,
the world can be scary and it can be
right.
a crazy place and it can be a cruel place. And if you have extreme fear, but also if you feel everything. I just
Right.
thought, I wonder if some of these people, maybe not all of them, but some of these people
Oh,
have built up such a layer of just defense that if you peeled that away, you wouldn't find a very, very sensitive person
I
underneath.
I love that way of thinking because I think that all of us are empathic on some level, and I think that our beliefs are given to us when we're here. So the question then becomes, did this person come in being very empathic, and then have someone give them these huge fear-based beliefs about everyone's out to
Mm,
get you, and all the conspiracy theories and all that stuff, and people who are looking for the utopian future, the nirvanic future, all of those beautiful outcomes, sometimes will use that as a method of swaying people to their belief. I'm not going to say the German guy's name from the 30s and 40s because you'll get flagged on this video. But
okay.
um, and you don't want to have that happen.
No.
um, but that guy from the 30s and 40s with the weird mustache, he his if you ever looked into what he did, he was like one of the lines he said, oh, so fascinating. He was like, no matter how big the lie, just keep saying it louder and louder and louder, and they'll believe it,
Mm,
right? Because people are looking for answers, and here's somebody saying that's louder than everything else, so I have to go with that, and so they're looking for a way out. They're looking for a pathway to something better, and of course, if anything's not in alignment with that way of thinking, it's got to be their evil. So, like they talk
right.
about the liberals and all that
Right.
stuff. But then they don't see when January 6th happened, they don't see what they're doing as evil because the propaganda has worked.
Right.
They believe they're fighting for God and country.
Yeah. Yeah. And there we go back to intent, right? Their
Right.
intent was they thought they were, at least most of them thought that they were doing something that was they were being asked to do by their president. They
Right.
really thought, we're really saving the country right now. And um yeah, yeah, very, very interesting. But yeah, I had a thought and now it's gone again, so it'll come back.
I
It'll
have
come
that all
back.
the time. I'm rounding on 60
No,
now, so
it's
it's going to
like,
happen.
oh, exactly. So what do you think happens to people who commit earthly crimes and are never punished on the earth? Does it help them to pay a penance here?
Um, does it help them to pay a penance here? It's interesting. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I really have an answer to it, but let me use a different story to kind of give you an idea about this. I think
Sure.
sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be a consequence, right? And to give you an example, I know a man who was an amazing individual. He taught Kundalini yoga and was just the sweetest, most loving, always had a big twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face until he did alcohol or drugs.
Mm,
And the second he did alcohol or drugs, he became an absolute butthead, a nasty, horrible individual. And I was talking to him, and he'd go off and come back and have a black eye. All these things would happen to him when he did drink or drugs, and he'd come back. And finally, I was like, I like this guy. I love this guy. He's a great guy, but I can't like him, and he needs a consequence. So I said to him, I said, Michael, I really love you to death, but uh, um, I can't be your friend anymore.
mm,
And he said, why? I said, because I only like you half the time. The rest of the time, I don't like you.
right.
You're mean. You're vindictive. You're doing horrible things, and I I am not your friend. The second you stop doing those things, I'll be your friend again.
Right.
And it was a big moment for him because in his mind I was his best friend. And what happened was that was the pivotal moment That was his pivotal moment. He left where we were. We were at a medieval fair here in Ohio. He left the fair. He went home. He got into rehab. He became a school teacher. And he's been teaching high school ever since without drugs or alcohol.
Uh,
But he needed that pivotal moment to make that change. The question is there going to be someone there when you give them that pivotal moment, when you give them that consequence? Is there going to be something there that's going to help them, get over the evil they've done, and then put them into. So the question really comes back to is, are they learning anything here on earth by having justice? Well, in that story, I was the justice served,
right,
right?
right,
And he learned something. But he went home to a sister who loved him and helped him do all those things. So, it's just when you go into punishment, you put somebody in prison, that can be a death sentence in itself.
right,
They're going to die in prison, right? Or they can go into prison and they can transform their lives. But it's a matter of having the systems in place that help them do that. Now,
right.
I remember when Gandhi said, somebody said to Gandhi, an eye for an eye. He says that kind of thinking will make the whole world blind.
Hmm.
Right, right. It's
That's
like
right.
that's exactly right. And I think a death for a death that'll just make the whole world dead.
Right, right. Um, I just wanted to get a few people their comments in
Oh,
the
please,
chat, 'cause people are
please.
just commenting away.
I can't see them,
Um,
so
um, let me see. Okay, so here's a question from Polly Wanda. Why let evil have power over you in the first place? Is evil does you and you call it temptation, right? So
Mhm.
either you give in or you don't give in.
Right.
Why do people give in?
Well, it comes down to the endorphins of what that'll make them feel like,
Mm,
right? I believe a lot of, like I said, we're here to feel our separation, and so we want to feel something more positive. So people get tempted by things. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, but I'll be darned if I don't eat a bunch of pizza.
yeah.
Right, right, right. But I said earlier about the breathing thing, right? Um, if I'm an alcoholic, by the way, this is apple cider, not anything alcoholic, right? If I'm an alcoholic and I'm like, I need a drink, I need a drink, I need a drink,
Right.
feeling. So I need a
Right.
cigarette, I need a cigarette. They're associating the substance with allowing themselves to let go of the fears and the
Mhm.
anxiety of the stresses. And it's the same thing. Why do people do it? Because they're tempted by something to make them feel better.
Right.
Because they're in this physical world not feeling the love. And so what they're doing is they're finding things to make them feel something. And that's a
Right.
lot of times what temptation is hey, this will make you feel better. Even in the desert, the story of Jesus in the desert, it's like they're tempting him with food and water and riches
Mhm.
and the kingdom of heaven and all the power and everything. And that's all just temptation. So,
Right.
and the other thing is, this other thing I will say here is, if you look at her question, why let evil have power over you? No, nothing can have power over you unless you choose to let it have power over you.
Right.
And so, if this question is based on the belief that there is an external force that's out to get you, and there isn't one.
Right.
And what it is our own temptations, our own fears, our own anxieties, and when you come to that space of just going, letting it go, you realize, oh, I'm fine. I'm good. Everything that, and it sounds so flippant to say it that way. And I don't mean to marginalize or minimize
Right.
anybody's
Right.
pain or suffering. But it really does come down to that choice. There is nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you because we kind of were touching on it a little bit, but um, what is this mass hysteria or this mass mental illness or whatever's going on right now with people believing these weird? conspiracy theories, and what is that? What is because this question made me think of that. It's like, what is going on there? Because
So
even back in the Bible, you had
yeah,
mass hysteria, or mass, I can't think of the word, but those kinds of things. What do you think is going on there?
I think that when people don't feel contented or joyful or loving in their lives, they look for something to blame. And so
Mm,
they're constantly looking for the next conspiracy, the next reason why. They're always saying, I mean, and it is a mass hysteria. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of people who showed up in Dealey Plaza in Texas to see John F. Kennedy show up. I mean,
right,
I mean,
right,
that's insane, right?
right.
But and not only that, that he was going to be the vice president to Donald Trump. That would ever happen in any
I
world.
know. No, exactly. It's like, what? It
It
doesn't
makes
even
no
make
sense.
sense.
The
Yeah,
most democratic president in the world, right?
exactly.
But I think the people are justifying, and it's actually funny talking about justice, crime and punishment, and crime and justice. They are justifying. They are
Right,
justifying why their life is the way it is by saying that person did something wrong to me. That
right.
person did something horrible to me. And look at these people and those evil people over there who are against me. And then you have people like Alex Jones who says, "Look, I have a way to make a bunch of money here.
Hmm.
I just have to foster their fears, right?"
Right,
But that's been a long time running. I mean, that has been something that has been used throughout centuries and centuries and centuries. I mean, in 1830, this guy named Minister Darby invented something that that evangelicals are using today to great success. In 1830, he invented the rapture.
oh,
Yeah, it's not in the Bible.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's not in the Bible at all. In fact, what's interesting is when you go back and you look at Minister Darby's writings, he said, "I heard a dream of a young Scottish boy, and I opened my Bible and I interpret a passage." That's where the rapture came from.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, so and think about that. The rapture says 144,000 souls, right? How many people on earth?
Right.
Not a bunch of us are going to survive
Billions.
that, right? Right. you know, um, so
Right.
it really, it's yeah, that's not in the Bible at all. So there, even the I did a video recently on end times and Armageddon and all that, which is the good coming back to defeat evil,
Right.
and people were shocked when I told them what Armageddon means. It means hill of Megiddo. And
Oh, really?
when you're in Israel, there's the Megiddo Valley, and there's a
Mhm.
hill there. And back in ancient times, they figured if there was going to be a war, it was going to be right there on the hill of Megiddo. And so it was the Battle of Armageddon. So I mean,
Interesting.
isn't that
Yeah,
interesting? So all
very.
all the interesting things. And then of course the judgment that's coming from Revelations. Now I have a very clear memory of this one because that John supposedly wrote that, and I have a memory of handing off a letter to send, and I don't have
Oh,
much
wow.
memory of that, but I have always felt that that was a letter warning the various churches slash camps of what Nero was about to do. And I
Oh,
said that for years, and then they were using Jewish numerology, and they discovered that 666 translates to Nero. And they were like, "Well, we think it's Nero." But then they went and they found another copy of Revelation in a different language, and it translated to 363. But
oh, wow.
but in that language, Nero translated as 363. So so it was literally a warning about what Nero was going to do and how Nero was going
Right.
to assault them back then, right? So all of the evils and all of the judgments that are coming in Christianity and spirituality are based in 2,000-year-old society, rebels basically fighting against the empire, right? in the
Right.
Star Wars terms, right?
Right.
But in reality, they were evil was being played up, Evil
Right.
was being played up serve to serve. It's people in power.
Right. Right. And I think this is actually goes to Mountain Sunshine has a question, and I think it goes exactly to that point. Why do people believe lies? Is it a
Yeah,
choice, or are they hypnotized in some way? And it is that I just want to believe this. I've never seen it more prevalent than now. I
right.
mean, they'll pull out some just weird conspiracy theory and they'll just grab onto it because, oh, I want to believe that. I don't want to believe we're wrong, anything but we're wrong.
Yeah,
So I'll take this. And I've never seen it more of a choice than it is right
yeah.
now.
I completely agree with what you just said. People are very invested in being right,
Yeah.
and the reason they're invested in being right because if they are wrong, then they are will not be loved in some form. They will not be respected in some form, and so they have to be right. It's so fascinating to me. It's like my story has a bunch of reincarnation in it, right?
Hmm.
But I get judged by Christians all the time. They tell me that I'm the Antichrist. They tell me I'm the false prophet. They tell me I'm a blasphemer, which I love that word. They just say blasphemer. Makes me laugh. But what's interesting is when you dive into that their belief is they have to be right. So anything that doesn't purport to what their belief is, they have to be right.
Right.
And and it's interesting because like the concept of reincarnation, and this is not about reincarnation, but it predates Christianity by thousands of years. Jainism and Hinduism and Buddhism all have it in there, right? But for some reason it's taboo in Christianity because they've said so. So
Right.
it's an evil, right? And the idea of the evil itself was a choice. And why do they believe lies? People believe lies because they don't like how their life feels. So they believe a lie because it's the justification as to why their life is the way it is.
Right. It feels
And
better.
now let's talk about the
Yeah.
second part of this question because
Yeah.
I I studied hypnosis, so I have an interesting concept here. Now, I studied hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, and what's really interesting is most people don't realize they go into a trance state every day. And has
Oh,
anyone ever been driving down the road and thinking about something and you missed your exit?
yeah.
That's a trance state. You're
Oh,
actually in a trance
interesting.
state, right? Have you ever had someone say something really weird and you kind of went, "What was that?" Right? That's a trance state. In neurolinguistics, we would call that an anchor. I would say something to you like, "So when would now be a good time?"
Right.
And you go, "Now, good time? Oh, well, when would? That makes no sense,
Yeah.
right?" Right?
What's going on?
It kicks you into trance state, and then they drop in a subliminal line behind. And so we go into natural trance states all day long, so we become suggestible.
Mm,
And so when we allow ourselves to get out of our conscious mind and just go off into tangents, and most of the time those tangents are our fears and anxieties. So we have our fears and our anxieties. We're in a trance state. Someone comes along and says, "This is why you feel that way,"
mm,
and you go, "Oh, I'll believe that lie because it fits with what I'm feeling," right? And
right.
when in reality, it's a choice. You get to choose to believe what you want to believe. The problem is that when you believe in a lie that's told to you just for the sake of feeling better, you're actually once again medicating your fears.
Right.
And it really comes back to the idea of just be loving in your life. You know, be the good.
Right.
As they say.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Counteract all this craziness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. I just want to bring I've got so many comments in here. I just want to bring some of them in here.
Oh yeah. Please
Um,
take your time. Take your
yeah,
time. I love this topic. I think it's a great topic,
I
and I
do
think
too.
coming in from different angles is kind of nice too. I'm going to take a sip here.
No, that's fine. How about, so this is Barbara says, Gaber Matt wrote a book entitled "The Myth of
Of normal.
Normal in a Toxic Society." I feel some of our society wants cookie cutter people who will obey.
A lot of people who are striving for power want cookie cutter people who obey.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, the people in power are the ones holding the cookie cutter. And so the cookie cutter is the shape of belief they want to give you for you to just be in their on their cookie sheet. And the reality of it is that you have to step out of what other people think to come back to your authentic self, because your authentic self is an expression of the source. And if God is love, being your authentic self means that you're like, I'm comfortable in my skin. I feel good about who I am, and things might be tough now, but I'm fixing it. I am resolving it. And what they're saying is, what people with the cookie cutters are saying is like, look, if you do these things in this shape, then you're going to have this kind of cookie outcome, and
Right.
then they fall in line. One of the things that I think that the wisest person, one of the wisest people in my life was my mom,
Hmm.
and had her master's degree in liturgy, and was head of liturgical doctrine in our Catholic Church. But when I turned 18, she said, John, spirituality is a personal journey. You need to discover what you believe. And so I went off and I ended up working at Renaissance festivals, surrounded by people of all different spiritual beliefs.
Hmm.
And I found beauty in all of it. And I found truth in all of it. And there were parts of it parts of their beliefs I didn't buy into. But when I
Right.
was able to look at it from the outside and be the odd person who didn't believe that and didn't believe that and didn't follow that politician or that school of thought, I had a big dead tree in my backyard, and I was like, how do I get rid of this tree? And I decided, well, I'm just going to get rid of this tree for free. So I put a picture of the tree in Facebook Marketplace, and I said, free firewood, you cut. Right? And a guy and his mother showed up at my house, and they were very nice people, and they were just out there and they were cutting firewood and loading it on their trailer, and I was out there talking to them, and she said, "My neighbor just put up a Biden sign. I set it on fire." That's exactly what
Oh,
she said.
okay.
And I turned to her and I said, that seems a bit extreme to me, but you and I are not going to talk about politics because I like you and I don't want to not like you,
Right.
right? And never talked about it again. By the end of it, talking about cookie cutters. She baked me cookies, and
Oh,
and she asked me to speak to her son about how to make his life better. Right now, I could have easily said, "How dare you? I'm from Delaware. Joe Biden is my man."
yeah, exactly.
I grew up in Delaware. I've known Joe Biden since I was a little boy, right? And
Right.
we used to call him Foot and Mouth Joe. Big hearted, really good intentioned man, but man, he can't speak. you
Right.
he just
Puts
speaks
his foot in his mouth constantly.
constantly, foot and mouth Joe, but a good guy, and but I could have easily taken the polarity of saying she's evil and I'm good, and not had some good cookies, right? And in
Right.
reality, I didn't take that. I said, okay. I gave her my quote of that's a bit extreme,
Right.
and I'm not going there with you. And I say that all the time to people. If you watch my comments on my YouTube channel, people come on and they say all kinds of things. I say, I respect your beliefs. The first thing I say.
Right.
That's not mine. I disagree, but you do not have to succumb to lies, and you do not have to succumb to evil. And yes, I agree with the cookie cutter philosophy. That's why we have the polarities we have in society right now. And I think that if more of us would come to our authentic self outside of the mold, we'd have
Right.
better cookies.
Yeah. Well, and I love your response to that woman because um, it was an egoless response, right? You didn't take a stance. You refused to take a stance
Right.
in any camp. You refused to go into that and be
Right.
led into that ego state.
Yeah, I
And
discovered
that's,
a
yeah,
long time ago that when someone comes at me mad, sad, frustrated, angry, coming at me hard, if I stop and I take that breath and I say, in my mind, I say, what is her fear? What are they afraid of? I can usually figure out what their fear is,
mm,
and
mhm,
I can usually go either label their fear, basically say what it is, or I can just say, okay, I'm not going there. I'm just not going
Right.
there. And let me see if I can find something here. I don't know if I can or not. If I can, I'll just look real quick. Yeah, I don't think I have it anymore. I had a, I do private sessions, and when I do, when I do my private sessions, private readings with people, they're booked out. I do 12-hour days Monday through Thursday, doing that, and
Wow.
every so often I get an email from someone who is just lost in their fears of the world and believe that they're evil and believe that they're in the negative place. And I had one who contacted me about 3 weeks ago now, and he literally was on the verge of killing himself. And I had just finished my 12-hour day, and I was sitting out there, and I opened this email. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to jump on now." So I jumped online real quick. I turned on my camera, and I sent him a direct email, and the topic was, "Open this link now. John is waiting." And he opened the link, and he's shocked because I was sitting there, right, right, right. And I said, "Do you feel desperate?" And he started crying, and because sometimes it takes someone to say it
Right.
for the release to start. So I
Right.
said, "Do you feel desperate?" He started crying, and I said, "Cry it out, cry, buddy, cry. I'm with you. I'm here with you. Just cry." And he cried, and he
Mhm.
cried. Finally, I said, "Okay, now here's what I'll do. Take a big deep breath and relax all your muscles." And we did this multiple times. Every time I do it, I tell this story, I get goosebumps. So I said, "Okay, do it again." Finally, I said, "How do you feel?" And then he couldn't talk. He was like totally silent. He goes, I feel better." I said, "Here's the deal." I said, "You chose to reach out to me. You chose to take that breath. You chose to exhale. You chose to feel better. You have the power to create anything in your life. And all you really needed to do is realize that you're the one choosing. And you can
Mhm.
choose good and you can choose evil. But you can choose right now to look at this moment not as the product of your past, but the hopeful intent of the future, and choose your intention to move forward. And once you choose that intention to move forward, we're going to create cool things. What do you want to create? What do you want your future to
Mhm.
feel like?" And by the time I was done, he was laughing, he was joking. He sends me emails now saying, "This is what happened today," right? So
Oh,
if you would have heard the end of his letter, I truly believe he was on the verge of suicide when I got that message. I got that, just empathically felt that way. And but it was a
yeah.
matter of coming back to that moment of saying, yes, sometimes it feels hopeless. Sometimes it feels like the evil is out to get you. Sometimes it feels that way. But you can choose to take your moment back. You can
Mm.
choose to be in this moment and set your evils down, be they to you or from you. And you can choose to create something better and something new. And, you know, be born again, set down the past and move
Yeah.
forward into something new. And what happened was, he's still around and he's still talking to me. So, but that's a lesson I think all of us need to learn when we get into these polarities of good and evil. They're they're
Right.
they're almost a non-reality in the fact that they've been told to you, they've been taught to you, and they are the lies that people were listening to. And if you think about it more along the lines of temptation or accuser is what the definition
Right.
says. You know,
Right.
it's not a balance, a yin and yang of good and evil, right? It literally is me, myself, and my choices, because temptation is also
Right.
a choice.
We had a couple of months ago because I have a club, the Intuit Club, and I do like a meditation and a spirit message. And one of the spirit messages was all about conscious choice, making conscious choices all the time. And I think those two examples actually are really illustrate that in those moments it's like those conscious choices and the advice you gave this man
Yeah.
um to consciously choose
Mm.
a different path. Because we do in every situation, every moment we have choice. We're here to use our free will. So I love both of those stories
Well,
actually.
and,
So
and think about this. If you're standing in your present moment and you're focusing on, this is how the world is because of my past, right? that's looking backwards, trying to go forwards.
Right.
And Robin Williams was once asked if he would ever do a Mork and Mindy reunion, and his response was, "You don't look back if you want to go forward, or you'll just walk into a tree." Right? So you don't want to be.
Right.
You want to focus forward. You want to focus. I say I look at it this way. You're in this moment, and you want to create something different. Most people, when they decide they want to choose something different, they create this big, giant, daunting thing
Right.
out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they think they have to get to it, but you're never not in your present moment. And that big, daunting thing out there is coming to you depending on what you choose to do with this present moment. Now, do you choose to focus on a good outcome or a bad one? I had
Right.
my son when he was very young. There was a bully in school. He used to pick on him, and on the way to school, and he would have a tantrum. He'd get mad and get frustrated, and the bully loved that. That's what the bully wanted.
Hmm.
And so we started doing this thing on the way to school. I'd say, Kynan, I explained to him. I said, every time you give him that, you're just giving him what he wants. And what if you just decided not to do what he wanted and just have a good day instead? He'd say, okay. So on the way to school, we'd say, Kynan, are we choosing a good day or a bad day? He'd say, a good day. And within 2 weeks, he was never bullied again
Oh, wow.
because he stopped feeding the
Right.
the bully. So
What he wanted.
yeah,
And I think this is a interesting point. Aspie Third Eye says about the people we were talking about that believe lies and are kind of in this mindset. They're stuck in the scarcity mindset.
yeah,
There's and it is that because it's along the lines of that kind of selfishness we saw like during the pandemic, and that me, all about me kind of thing, and that idea that there's only so much, so I'm going to get mine, and
right.
you're not going to have any, and I'm scared you're going to take mine, so
That,
I'm
that's
going to
that's why
build a
all of us.
wall.
That's why all of us have spare toilet paper, right?
Right.
For that exact reason. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And we all want our fair share, our due. We don't want someone to have more than us, right? Because that makes us
Right.
less than. There is no hierarchy in reality. You know,
Right.
if it happened again tomorrow, I would give toilet paper to my neighbor because I
Right.
have it in the house, right?
Right.
I would share it. I would do whatever I want. And my neighbor next door they're elderly couple, and they had two big trees fall down on their property, and they were like, "Oh, I don't know what we're going to do." So one day they were in their house and they heard a chainsaw going, and they came out, and I was back there chopping up their trees and throwing it in their trailer and hauling it away for them. And they were shocked that somebody would step out of the way and do something nice for someone. They were like, oh, they're going to lose all this money and all this stuff. And so they felt guilty that I did it. And so they bought me a box of Omaha steaks, which I was happy for. but but the idea is I didn't want anything in return, right?
Right.
But and that's the way we should be living our lives. We should not want anything. And I said earlier, what you think you become, you create your world, and what's good and bad. And we each have our own experience. I had a time I went to dinner with a friend of mine, and we were walking into the restaurant, he literally said, "I hate this place. These people are so nasty here. I hate this place." And I said, "What are you talking about? I love this place. This is like the coolest greasy spoon in the world, and I love this." And we went in, we sat down at the table, and the waitress came over and she said, "I'm having a bad day, and it's going to reflect in my service." That's literally what she said. And I said, "I'm so sorry you're having that experience. Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some dinner and handle the tables." And she started laughing. She didn't expect that at all, right? My friend was grumbling and, "Oh, I hate this place. This is terrible. These people are nasty," right?
Right.
So we ordered our meals.
How funny.
My salad came, and I swear to you, it looked like she went out in the garden and hand picked each leaf. Right? I mean, it was choirs could have sang when this salad hit the table. His salad came. It was the core of the iceberg lettuce.
Oh gosh.
Literally the core broken in half. And he complained, "What is this? This is terrible, horrible." No, no, no. And She takes it back to the kitchen, brings it back out a few. Obviously, broke it off a few more times, brought it back out.
Right.
See, so he's bitter, hating life. Our meals came. Mine was perfect. It was perfectly cooked. Everything was just perfect on this thing. He cut into his steak, and the center was frozen.
Oh my
Right,
gosh.
right. And he's having this horrible experience. Right
Yeah.
at this table, I had a wonderful experience. I got a phone number, right? And and he had a negative experience at the same table. So I
Right.
didn't succumb to the potential evil that was
Right.
being shown to me. I didn't choose to create that way. I chose to create a beautiful experience. He chose to hate it. He chose to lean towards it and go towards the negative side, the evil side. And
Right.
I chose the good side. And we both had exactly what we believed.
Right. It's the that's a perfect story about how we create our reality
Yeah.
depending on what and our beliefs from either when we're growing up and we get convinced of certain things or just our mood or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, earlier you were asking, you were asking about, I forget what it was, but it reminded me of this story. Sometimes when we're putting our focus on something and we choose to manifest something into our experience, a lot of times what happens is, manifestations will follow the path of least resistance, be they good or evil, right? So if
Mhm.
you focus on evil, you'll get it the same way, right? But sometimes because it's following the path of least resistance, sometimes like water going downhill, sometimes it has to fall off a cliff to get to the lowest point, to the
Right.
manifestation point. So
Mhm.
sometimes the negative thing happens, and the only thing that really gives you the positive outcome is by keeping the belief in the positive outcome no matter what happens.
Right.
And so, to give you an interesting example of this, is years ago, 20 years ago, I was supposed to speak at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, the Edgar Casey Foundation.
Mhm.
And I was going down there. They were selling my book, and I was going down there. And it was about 2 months before I was supposed to go, and I had a big chip in my front tooth, and I was like, I don't want to go to the ARE with a big chip in my front tooth, and with the Edgar Casey Foundation. Oh my God,
Right.
right? So I said, "Thank you, God, for the perfect tooth I am receiving. Amen." That's the way I pray, and because it's a completely present moment statement. And
Mhm.
that afternoon, I bit into a submarine sandwich, and the rest of the tooth broke off.
Oh no.
To make a long story short, I ended up having a phone call about 2 hours later from a lady who I used to work with, who is now the president of an organization that specifically helped Renaissance Festival entertainers and vendors get medical and dental work done.
Oh my gosh.
Right? How specific is that? Now, I did Renaissance
Yes.
festivals for years and years and years. She ended up overnighting me all the money to fix the tooth, and I
Oh
never.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
But when the tooth broke, I could have said, "Well, this is evil. This is terrible. How this is," and get focused on that. And I never would have said my tooth broke off when she called. But because I held my belief in that moment, I
Right.
chose to believe in the positive outcome and the good outcome. It came to fruition, and it's for me in my life. I now call when things happen, I'm focused on something positive, something good to come into my life, and something happens that seems contrary now. I
Mhm.
literally call it a broken tooth moment.
Right.
I get to choose at this moment. Well, that didn't work. Well, it did work. So
Right. And I think that's it's so important. And I think it's a perfect place to kind of sum this up because I think it is it we it does come down to choice, doesn't it?
it does. It
Good,
does.
bad, good, evil, it comes down to our person and also how we react to it as well.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I like to call it being an action hero rather than a reaction zero. You know, you have this moment where something comes up and all your past beliefs says, "Oh my God, I have to act this way because it's going to be bad." Or you go, like I said, when something comes up and you go, "Oh, where's the fear? Where's their fear? Where is this falling down? Where am I creating a joyful life? Am I choosing not to have the bully me today? Am I
Right.
choosing not to be a victim of all of my past experiences?" Am I choosing not to judge others for their past experiences? Am I choosing not to be the evil in their life?
Right.
It comes down to us making the choices to, as was coined in the original interview I did with you, Kim, to live a loving life.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. That's
yeah.
exactly right. Well, thank you so much, John, for coming on and talking about this. Like I said, it's been something I've wanted to tackle for a long time. I've thought so much about, especially in the world we're in right now. It's so clear that there are some huge polarities going on that
Yeah.
we don't always understand. And so, thank you so much for hanging out and bringing some clarity to these subjects. I really
A-
appreciate it.
Absolutely a pleasure. And for all your listeners, if you're interested, just check me out at johnofnew.com, or my YouTube channel at John of New. And what I always do whenever I go on any show or any interview like this, I always give the audience a potential discount on a a reading with me, not a free reading, but you get $50 off a reading with me if you want. And I just
Oh
gave Kim the
wow.
link, and she'll put it below.
Yeah, I'll put the links below. I will. Yeah, I'll put the links below, and you can get a hold of John. And what's coming up on your channel, John?
Oh my gosh, I have videos out right now all the way to the next 3 weeks already in queue. I just broke, like I said, 700 videos.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that.
Just I mean, especially because it was last September 10th when you interviewed me. So
Oh wow.
yeah, it's a year and 2 months, and I blame you entirely for everything I do. It's all completely your
I'm
fault.
sorry.
Can I tell that story real quick?
Of course, yeah.
So I used to do the Spirit Cafe podcast. My business has my John of New stuff has gotten so I had to hand it over to Tamara to be on alone now, and
Oh wow.
I brought Kim on, and we brought Kim on as a guest. And in the middle of your interview, I ended up saying something about reincarnation and kind of blew it off. I was like, "Yeah, I got a little reincarnation story in mind." I just kind of blew it off.
Yeah.
We get off the interview, and you said, "All right," and then this is like after we're done. You're like, "All right, tell me about the reincarnation thing." Now I hadn't talked about it for almost 10 years,
Right.
and so I was like, "Okay, well." There was only one other person who this happened with, and that was Tamara Zoner, my co-host on Spirit
Mhm.
Cafe. I opened my mouth, and the entire story just started blurting out. And like I said, I hadn't talked about it with anybody for a decade. And so I was like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, holy smokes, this is weird. Why do I feel like I need to tell Kim everything in my life? Right. Well, you get 3 days later, I get an email from Kim. I want to talk to you about reincarnation on my show. And you were so gracious. She said you can share as little or as much as you want.
Right.
And I was like, that's so great. And so the day before, I was like, okay, is this time for me to come back out into my spiritual work? And I got a clear yes, a very clear yes. So I started the YouTube channel, and I rebought my domain name from 10 years earlier, John of New. And went on. We had on the day before I had four subscribers, me, my sister, my friend Holly, and Tamara Zoner. And the day after that interview, I had 350 subscribers. Like,
Oh my
right
gosh.
now, check this out. This is something I think that you might not know. I got
Oh
an
my.
email that next day that was in reply to an email that I had written 15 years earlier. Right,
Oh my gosh.
and now between that time and this time, I let the domain name go and I let my email go. So this
Oh
was
wow.
all new, been reset up again. The lady says, she says, I was told I have to talk to you. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, well, I was having a reading from a lady in Hawaii, and she says you need to talk to John. He's the reincarnation of John the Beloved. He's big, he's bald, he wears glasses, and you need. She says I saw him 10, 15 years ago, and I talked to him, but I don't even know where he is. And she went back digging through old emails, and she found an email exchange with me, and she hit reply to that email,
Oh
and
my
and
gosh.
it came to me, and her story, it's her story to tell, but she remembered a past life, and I never verify past lives. I verified hers.
Really?
Yeah, oh, this what because I got it flat out like the second she got on the call, and I was like, holy, I don't do it because I know I've met 30 Mary Magdalenes and all the apostles multiple times over. Right? Everybody comes and tells me they're who they say they are, so I don't verify because it's not my
Right,
place.
right.
But for her, I was like, this is absolutely true. But yeah, so that was all off of you pushing me back in, and I'm blaming you, and I'm going to curse you for it for the rest of your life. No, I'm kidding.
And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad, and really, it's all about sharing, right?
Yeah, it
Because
is.
I heard that story, and I had to ask you about it, and then I just wanted to share. I wanted to share it. And these communities. That's really what this is about. It's about supporting one another, sharing with each other, lifting each other up. It's all of those things. So
We're,
it was
we're,
my pleasure, John. And I'm so
we're
happy
all
for
in
you.
this.
You sound like you are so busy. So I'm
Oh,
so,
you know what? And
so glad.
I the reason I have 700 videos is because I am so passionate about it.
Yeah,
I just love I love what I'm doing right now. I love sharing my truth, and I don't expect anybody to believe anything I say. I'm sharing my truth, and if it rings true for you, great. If it doesn't, I respect you.
right.
And by coming at it from that point of view, I've made some amazing friends, and on my membership group, I've got we get together and we just laugh the whole time because we're all sharing from different perspectives, and it's just beautiful. And I
Yeah,
blame you.
I know your audience loves you. So I'm so happy you came on, and good luck to you as always. And
Anytime, Kim.
yeah,
Anytime.
well, thanks everybody. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Saturday. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay,
Bye.
bye.